welcome to Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory. I am Patrina Wisdom, abundance activator, author, TEDx speaker, and founder of Pure Abundance Retreat. And I am so excited for our first guest of season 5 of our podcast, Mrs. Carolyn Bottino. She is the founder of the Money Empowerment Project. And you all know I love anything that's about money and abundance. So welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you.
So happy to have you. Yes. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I like to leave that to you because obviously you're the most intimate with yourself, but don't just tell them what you do. Tell them who you are.
Ooh, good question. Yeah, so as you said, my name is Carolyn Bottino. I'm the founder of the Money Empowerment Project. It's actually my pet project that came about because in my other life, I am a bookkeeper, and I have worked with hundreds of people and their money, and I've had this front row seat to their intimate relationships with money. Mm-hmm. And as I was working with people, I just started discovering all of these interesting ways that people were interacting with money. And I went into it thinking, wow, I bet that if people have lots of money, they have a great relationship with money. And if they don't have much, they must have a really crappy relationship with money. And I was so wrong. Mm-hmm. And so as I really started to see how people started to interact with their money, it led me down this path. And I realized that it's more that we need to learn how to be empowered around our money and understand our money stories versus just having money. Because having money doesn't necessarily give you a great relationship with money.
Absolutely. And we're definitely on the same page with that. Both of us work in the money space, kind of on both sides, yes. The actual practical application, education of money, but then also the mindset, the blueprints, if you will, right?
Yes.
And so everybody is called into their impact project, as you called it, pet project, for a reason. Yes. And so I'd love for you to just share with us a little bit about how you got on this path of money and empowerment and bookkeeping.
Yeah, I kind of fell into it backwards, as I did with everything in my life, I feel like. So in my corporate real life career, I shouldn't say real life, but you know what I mean, the before I owned my business life, I was an event planner. And I had worked for a company, and I ran an event center for about 7 years. And my parents were both entrepreneurs, and so I'd been around entrepreneurship my entire life. And my parents worked really hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, really hard. I watched it day in and day out. I grew up in the 80s when my dad has his big brick phone, and before he had his brick phone, he had, his pager, and he was stuck to his phone constantly. And my mom had a business in our basement. We employed all the kids in our neighborhood. I just saw this entrepreneurship. Hustle. Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. Hustle all the time. And so I just always assumed that to make money, you just had to hustle and you had to work really hard. So when I was running this event center, I was working really hard, as you can imagine, just as I learned from my parents. And about year 4, we got a second building gifted to us. I was working for a nonprofit. And I had told my boss, sure, I'd love to run it, and we'll figure out what the role will look like as this develops. And so we had said at some point, I'd get a raise for it. So a year into this project, a whole year into the project, I was like, okay, it's time. And we had mirrored the role to match what I was doing at the other building. And I went to my boss and kind of laid everything out and said, okay, I think it's time. And he came back to me and offered me a 4% raise.
Okay.
And I was like, what?
Not quite what you were expecting, I'm sure.
I was like shocked and hurt and furious all at the same time. And, after a few agonizing and sleepless nights, I just decided I had to stand up for myself and told him I wasn't going to work for free.
Yeah.
And
Bravo.
The next day, he walked into my office and he fired me.
Right.
So there I was without a job and without health insurance and without...
For the first time, without a job.
Yeah.
Security.
Without that what I thought was security.
Okay.
And, I kept thinking, wow, I worked so hard just as I learned, and it didn't mean anything. And, it took me all of about 5 days to decide to open my own business.
Nice.
So it was it was time, it was the universe is pushing me through the door. But, it took a long time to unlearn all of that stuff.
Right.
All of that, like, oh, wow, I have to work really hard. And so basically I just moved from working really hard in my job to then working really hard in my business.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting ahead. And, I just had this income ceiling that I just kept bumping up against no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried. And finally, when I really started to dig into my own money story and started to do work around, money stories and what they really are and how they impact us, everything changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything changed.
Yep.
But it took a lot of undoing.
Well, so this actually sparks two questions for me. The first question is, did you grow up with money? So you saw your parents working hard for money, but did you see the fruits of their labor? Or did you all still have struggle financially?
We were very much middle class.
Okay.
Like we didn't have a ton, but we also weren't poor. So yeah, I mean, I saw money. We lived comfortably, but there was always a back end struggle of it. While we had money, it probably wasn't quite enough. It wasn't like we were living lavishly. Okay,
and so then that brings me to the second question. What did the work hard for money, hustle, say about, like, what did it mean about you, or what did you make it mean about you? Because you talked about that kind of glass ceiling where you're working hard for money, and you weren't able to break past a certain point financially. And so many people go through this, specifically women, right?
Yes.
And I've learned in my time that a lot of it is tied to worth.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you worked on your money stories, you worked on your blueprint, what did you learn was the story that you had been telling yourself around money?
That if I didn't work hard, I didn't deserve to have it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so as I really started, my business took off like a wild rocket. Like, in fact, the funny thing is that I was planning on
That's
doing...
That's a blessing.
Yeah, it is a blessing.
Yeah.
I was planning on doing event planning because that's where my background was, and then I was just going to do bookkeeping on the side because it was easy and fun and it was a side thing.
Did you hear that? Easy and fun. Bookkeeping.
Yes.
Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program.
So I had this idea that, I would just keep some steady income. I had no idea that there was such a need for bookkeeping.
Yeah.
And so I would show up and be like, oh, I can help you get your shit together. And everybody's like, oh my God, I need you.
Yeah.
And I'd get clients just like that, which was great. So within, a year, I had probably grown to 40 plus clients, and it was, really easy for me.
Yeah.
But I was working so hard because I was putting all of these things in place that were keeping me small and not allowing me to really grow. And it was because I had this underlying story that if I didn't work really, really hard for it, I didn't deserve to have that money.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little. I'm so glad that you said that you keep putting these things in place to keep you small, in case you didn't hear that. So tell us a little bit about those self-saboteurs. What were they for you?
Yeah, for me, it was, I didn't want to hire anybody because I was afraid that
Control!
I'm still working on the control freak aspects.
We're recovering. I reframed that. We're recovering control freaks.
Yes,
okay?
Recovering control freak. Yes, that's a great way to put it. Yes. So I didn't want to hire anybody because I truly believed that nobody else could do it like I could do it. And I was so afraid that my clients would be disappointed if I wasn't the person doing the work for them. And so when I finally did hire, I was then like trying to overcompensate for what my staff people were helping me do. And I still struggle with it, honestly. I mean, I'm getting much better. It's a journey. But that was the biggest one, was that I was really trying to keep control over everything. And I was overcompensating for things that didn't need to be overcompensated for.
Yes. So surrender,
Yes.
trust,
Sweet surrender.
really fun lessons. Fun. But necessary in business if you want to scale to a certain capacity.
And what was interesting is as I was going through my own entrepreneur journey, I was also seeing all of my clients go through this entrepreneur journey.
Yeah.
And so I have a very unique view of people and their money because I see that intimate relationship because I'm their bookkeeper.
Right.
Like my one client says that, when they die, they're going to make sure that their daughter knows who I am because I'm the one that knows all the skeletons in the closet and where all the bodies are buried and all of the things because it's not just about where you spend your money, it's how you interact with your money too. And so as I was going through my own journey and realizing all of these things, I was also noticing what was happening in all of my clients' businesses and personal lives as well. And I have this client that I've worked with for many, many years who's very wealthy. And I have other clients who are not wealthy at all. And what was really interesting to me is that the client who didn't have a lot of money has an amazing relationship with money. And she has an amazing way of manifesting and having the right things show up at the right time and the right things that have value and value to her. Whereas the woman who has all this money really wanted to bury her head in the sand and just felt she wasn't good with money. And I was like, wow, isn't this interesting?
Yeah.
And it just led me down this path of how many things we assume about money because we think that if we don't have it, it must be like, oh, when we have it, we'll be in this better place.
Right.
No,
not at all.
Not true at all.
I always say wealth and abundance is not about the money, right? Get the money part out of the way so that, you can thrive and create the life that you really want. And a lot of women specifically don't understand that. It's a very vulnerable thing let's just be honest. A lot of women have a lot of work to do just in their relationship with their self. And I truly believe that how you do anything is how you do everything. Absolutely. So it's a lot of times the same blind spots that we have in our relationship with ourselves are the same blind spots that are showing up in relationships with others and in relationships with our money. Relationships are relationships, people.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So you can't address one without addressing the other. And the relationship with a bookkeeper. Listen, okay, so true confessions. I have been an entrepreneur for now over 2 decades. And the first time I hired a bookkeeper, it was for my nonprofit. It was kind of pivotal, right, in the nonprofit space. However, my next bookkeeper didn't come until almost 2 decades later because of this shame.
Yes.
Because my earlier corporations, I had to learn how to operate a business at a different capacity. And there was shame. So we all have this money shame, these money conversations that we're having. But when you break those, when you find someone that you trust enough to say, okay, here it is. I'm taking off all my clothes here, right? I'm just going to let you see everything. And you form that relationship. Then you can start to really improve your relationship with your money, your relationship with your strategies around how you're managing it, where it's going, right? And so I feel like for yourself, just knowing you, not even well, but just knowing you in our conversations, is that you make people feel comfortable and safe. You create that space for them. Not to mention you're also like spiritual and, that's always lovely as well. But you meet them in a space that makes them feel comfortable letting down their guard and being vulnerable.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up because so much of it is that shame that you think that you're the only one that has, you look at everybody else and think, wow, they're making it. Nobody else has the debt that I have and nobody else has the, past due bill that I forgot to pay or whatever. But I can promise you, you are exactly like everybody else. Yeah. But we all feel like we have to put on this face.
No, it's the Instagram generation, right?
And you have to pretend that you know everything because you're in that space of I am an entrepreneur and I'm leading this company, so therefore I've got to have my shit together. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, not everybody not everybody has that,
Yeah.
you know? And once you realize that you're not alone in that process, then it becomes a little bit easier to let your guard down and be real. Because until you're real with yourself, you're not going to see any change.
100%.
You know,
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen.
I also believe that it's the reframe around, it doesn't matter how many commas or zeros I have in my bank account, because we all know in entrepreneurship, it shifts. It may be great for 2-3 months and like scarce for another 2-3 months. It's kind of a roller coaster. But what's important is not defining yourself by those numbers.
Absolutely.
And really being strong within yourself. And so I believe working with someone like you builds that confidence. And then also there's something to seeing trends, isn't there? Like, okay, well now I know I can project that in these months of my business, it's going to be down. So we plan, right?
Yeah.
That's what that relationship is for.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think it's just knowing, you know, so many people focus on how can I save money? And they don't want to spend the money to work with a bookkeeper or with anybody else or hire anybody
Such
for
a good
any
investment.
reason. Because they're just like, oh my God, I've got to save. Like I just talked to a potential client who said, I'd love to work with you, but I just don't think I can afford you because I'm new.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's the reason you should be affording somebody like me, whether it's me or somebody else.
Yeah.
Just because if you don't invest in yourself and your business, you're not going to make any changes whatsoever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And those shifts of being willing to spend the money is what's going to help you make the money.
100%.
Because now when I think about my numbers, my focus is 100% on how to get new clients and how to make money. Because if I want to spend something, I just go, you know what? I'm going to figure out a way to make it.
Exactly.
So if I'm like, okay, I want to coach with Patrina.
Yeah.
So guess what? I want to go on the Pure Abundance retreat.
Yeah.
I'm going to find the way to find the money instead of freaking
Take
out.
the step first and allow spirit to open up the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anytime we are a hell yes to something, everything in the universe will reorganize itself to make that happen.
Yes.
So
100%.
I could talk about this money stuff all day long. However, I want to just one personal question.
Yeah.
I want to find out from you, how has your improved relationship with money, trusting, surrendering, investing, and having team, all of these things that you've done for your business, how has that enriched your life, your relationships?
Oh, that is such a great question. So a big part of my money story was that I ended up moving to San Diego about 5 years ago. Actually, it was 5 years ago this weekend.
Interesting. Oh yeah, we met like right when you first moved here then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that had been on my dream list for over a decade.
Okay.
And once I started to say hell yes,
yes,
the doors started to open. And I actually wrote a book called The Land of Plenty.
Yeah.
And it is about my journey and how I ended up in San Diego, because it really was all of the stars aligning once I finally said yes. But it wasn't just saying yes to moving, it was like saying yes to all of these small little things. And one thing led to the next, and then the next thing led to the next. And if I would have been afraid to spend the money or invest in certain things or said yes or no to, you know, certain clients or certain opportunities of growth, everything would have been different.
Yeah.
But I just trusted in the universe. And
Yes.
that's really what it came down to, was that I just tuned in and followed my intuition in everything that I did. Everything.
Yeah.
And that's made all the difference in my business and in my life, in my relationship with my spouse, my family. I mean, you name it. It's because I've tuned into myself and my intuition.
Yes.
And that's really what the work around my money story has done for me personally.
Everything starts with you. Everything starts with you. Your mindset, your relationship with money, trusting in spirit or whatever source, you know, you connect with. So thank you so much. I'm so happy we were able to do this and that it worked out. That was amazing. So many nuggets. I hope you all were taking notes. You can always go back and watch this interview again. But thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you watch our entire season. More amazing women like this. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. And tune in. We will see you next week for another amazing episode of Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory.